Good afternoon. Broadcasting to you from Perth, Western Australia. This is Perth Pete. This afternoon I'd like to talk with you about my most horrific injury. This is in response to AngryAussie's video talking about one of his true stories and a horrific injury. On Easter Sunday of last year, of 2007, I awoke early in the morning desperately needing to go to the toilet. I took myself off to the toilet and had diarrhoea. I finished my business and went back to bed and went back to sleep. About half an hour later, I again woke up, again desperately needing the toilet. I took myself off and had another episode of diarrhoea. But at some point I must have passed out because I woke up having slumped forward from the toilet seat and knocked my head and was crumpled on the floor. I didn't realise what really had happened, but I cleaned myself up and thought, I'll just go back to bed and I need to sleep. But it seems I never made it back to bed, because the next thought I had was I was waking up on my bedroom floor with a sore head. And as I came to, I thought, ooh, what's happened here? And I've reached back and felt on top of my head and gone, wow, there's a big cut there. I think I'll have to take myself off to the hospital. But I didn't feel well enough to go to hospital at that time. So I thought, I'll just stay here and wait until I feel well enough. I know I didn't want to have diarrhoea at the hospital. So I grabbed an old pillow and pulled the doona down off the bed and just slept on the floor there for about 3 hours or so. I woke up a couple of times when I needed to go to the toilet, but on those occasions I just crawled. Anyway, I think it was about 11 o'clock or 11:30, about 4 hours after initially waking up with the first bout of diarrhoea, that I felt, I think I'm well enough to go to hospital now. I don't think I'm going to have diarrhoea anymore. So I crawled to the shower, had a shower whilst I was sitting on the floor, put some clothes on and stood up and just stood for a while, and I felt okay, so I thought, okay, time to go off to hospital. Now I remember as I walked out the front door, I thought, look, if my neighbour's home, I'll go and knock on his door and see if he can take me. But he wasn't home, so I got in the car and drove myself slowly to hospital. Now hospital was about 5 kilometres away, not all that long. Anyway, when I got to the hospital, I walked into the emergency room and stood at the counter, and there was 1 or 2 people in front of me, and I thought to myself, I don't want to risk falling down again, so I sat down. Now immediately I did that, the nurse behind the counter sort of perked up and said, what are you doing sitting down? And I said to her, well, I've got a cut head. And she came around from behind the counter and had a look at me and said, right, we're taking you through. She got an orderly and brought a wheelchair out and popped me in the wheelchair and wheeled me around to the observation room. Now emergency hospitals, especially on public holidays like Easter, take a little while, and I was prepared to wait, but they put me in observation and said the doctor will be along shortly. Anyway, the doctor came along and asked me some questions and said, were you unconscious at all? Did you knock your head at all? And I said, well, I think I've just glanced it. And he said, yeah, you've got a really nice cut there. I think they were worried about concussion. So they kept me in observation, and a couple of hours later they said, well, do you think you can stand up now? I said, yeah, okay, well, I'll give it a go. So I stood up, and a nurse on one side and an orderly on the one side. I was standing there for a while, and then I thought, oh, I think I managed to get out not good. And then I was down again, because the next thing I know, I was waking up with several nurses and orderlies rushing around me, and I thought, oh wow, I think we probably need to just keep you in for observation overnight, Mr. Hicks. So they put me back into bed, and about half an hour later another doctor came back and said, right, I'm ready to stitch you up, mate. So he began cleaning the wound and said, what did you hit your head on? You've done a really good job of this. This is a really neat wound. It's almost surgical in precision. And hey, there's some paint flecks in the wound. And I said to him, well, I've hit my head on a skirting board just short of the wall. And he said, well, okay, well, anyway. He stitched me up and put 11 stitches in the wound. And after they stitched me up, they wheeled me away to the observation ward and said, okay, well, we want to keep you overnight, Mr. Hicks, but that's up to you. I couldn't really understand why they wanted to keep me. So anyway, at about 6 o'clock I think it was, or maybe even later, they wheeled me through to an observation ward for overnight. And I lay there for a while, thought, no, I don't need to stay in hospital overnight. I can go. But I'll just take it easy. I'll just see if I'm up to it. So I stood up and stayed standing for a really long time and walked around for a really long time and sat up and watched some television, and I felt fine. So I discharged myself and drove myself home again. Now, I think it was the next day, or possibly even the next, when I started to think to myself, hey, if I was even perhaps 1 centimetre further away from the wall, I could have fallen down and escaped without a scratch. But if I was, say, 5 centimetres or more closer to the wall, perhaps I would have hit my head. And I wonder what sort of scalp or neck damage or vertebrae damage I could have suffered. So even though I've got an 11 centimetre long scar on my head and 11 stitches and I lost a lot of blood, I still think I'm lucky. So I think you'll agree that was pretty horrific, and if you can stand it, I'm just going to include some photographs taken a couple of days after my injury and the surgery to show you the stitches and the length of the wound. Thanks for watching. Bye.